Yeah, so just some general housekeeping before we get going with Nick. First of all, yeah, as always, if you could just kind of stay muted, we don't want any background noise. I don't even have to say that anymore. Everyone's pretty good at that. And then regarding the questions, so thanks for everyone that sent through questions. How we're going to structure it is we're going to run through kind of a series of questions for Nick. I'll ask them, they're your questions anyway. And then we'll go into kind of a bit more of an open floor where anybody can just ask questions and fire from there. If you haven't already, probably you will have, but just go check out the prediction market on Zeitgeist, see how it's going. It's been really, really good. I think it's been a good kind of traction builder for a lot of you. It seems the Polkadot community have really enjoyed it as well, and a little bit of kind of getting to know you all. So I think it's been good. Tomorrow with the AMA, with Jay from the Sumerian, it's going to be on X. Apologies, I made a mistake there when I sent you the Google Meet. He didn't actually say that to me. So it's on X. I've sent it to all of you, and it should actually be, if you go on your Google Calendar, I don't know if you, or just general calendar, you'll find the link in there. If not, just ping me. I'll make sure you're all sorted. On Thursday, we have the Web3 Foundation coming in, or Web3 Foundation. Radha Krishna, he is the technical educational lead there, so he'll be running a pretty cool workshop as well. And then if anybody else wants to chat about anything, I'll stay on the call after Nick is done. And if there's any questions, anything you're not sure about, just fire away and I'll be there. But yeah, I think let's get going. Nick has been such a big part of actually organizing the Academy as a Troy. They've kind of really got anything going on Mythical side, so we're super, super happy to have Nick involved. Nick started at Mythical about a year and a half ago, and he's got quite a good resume. So I think to get us going, Nick, it'll be great if you can kind of give us a little bit of background, first of all, on Mythical Games, and then a little bit of background on your role at Mythical Games as well.
Awesome, excellent, and great to see everybody. Yeah, so I'll give you a quick kind of backstory of myself and kind of how it dovetails into Mythical Games. So I think it's all relevant. So, yeah, I went to school, graduated, into computer science, started as an engineer at EA many moons ago. Worked my way into production over time, and ultimately kind of found myself at Activision as a director on MW3. Kind of at that point, I think as the engineer in me, I've always been a technologist at heart. I was like, all right, kind of console, what's next? And that was at the time kind of mobile gaming. I ended up taking a shot at a startup, about 20-person startup called Machine Zone, where we ultimately built and ran some of the biggest mobile games at the time, kind of Game of War, Mobile Strike. I've gone back to Activision doing Call of Duty Mobile, and then found my way at Jam City. So I'd ended up doing mobile for about 10-ish years. And, I was first exposed to crypto back in like 2011 with actually, ironically, on MW3 late one night with one of my rendering engineers. I was like, have you heard of this Bitcoin thing? It's like $200. Bought one for 200, and when as soon as it was $1,200, I was like, oh, I think I'm like in the money. So I sold generational wealth way too early. But anyways, it's probably the story of a lot of us. But yeah, kind of at Jam City, probably getting my years all wrong thanks to code, but sometime around Troy can fact check me, 2019. Do you remember when we started Champions? Somewhere around there.
Yeah, it was in 2020.
Yeah, 2020. Troy and some of us started the crypto division out of Jam City. And at the time, we were a small group within a larger company, or about 20, 30 people, probably some similar size or maybe even bigger as some of you. And at the time, we were game makers, wanted to make games, but also we were kind of faced with a bunch of other stuff around like, hey, choosing a chain and what's a wallet mean and seed phrase and all this other stuff that people kind of had to fumble through. Kind of in that phase, we had the opportunity to look at a whole bunch of different stuff, everything from like Forte to Polygon to, stuff at Mythical. And ultimately, that company ended up spinning off, but I was incredibly impressed with, I think, the offering that Mythical had at the time, and this is about a year and a half ago. Mythical, and still actually even kind of present day, was one of the only platforms that had at least a lot of the plumbing done that us myself as a game developer just didn't want to have to do. So, they were a technology company. They had several businesses with D-Market, kind of out in the wild, doing very well, as well as they had a chain and a wallet and guest accounts, and Blanco's Block Party on PC was out and was having some success. So from a game maker, I was like, oh, like it's really appealing to be able to come over to a spot of a platform that's made by game developers, kind of for game developers in a lot of ways. And at least the idea of kind of Web3 and like everything the Web3 embodies was represented, at least in Blanco's Block Party. I had NFTs, had a wallet, had a marketplace, had a game, which, even at that point, games were few and far between for Web3. But I was really excited about coming over and personally being able to now focus on games and not have to worry a lot about that plumbing. It's like they had a token live, with the Mythos. Well, I should say the Mythos Foundation had a token live. The DAO had a token that Mythical adopted, but even kind of getting a token up and launched, even for a small developer, was just, it's requires a year and a couple $1 million, which a lot of us didn't have. So, Mythical, I think, had a lot of the ingredients there in kind of there for a game to flourish. So being able to come over and kind of lead the next phase of their gaming, really into the mobile landscape with Rivals, was incredibly compelling to myself, because I fancy myself mostly as a game maker, although I'm a technologist at heart, so I'm always interested in kind of what's next for gaming. And I think Mythical was the furthest along, and I think we're still leading the pack on a lot of those fronts. And came over, got to work on Rivals, and we had the first big initiative we worked on was like, all right, we have this marketplace on the web, like what's it take to get it into the game and really have this low friction way for users to come in, acquire an NFT, put it up on a marketplace, sell all from within the home of their app. So that's what I had been working on really over the last probably 6-7 months with the team. So I don't know if that answers the full question, but we can kind of dig in from there.
No, it definitely does. You touched on a couple things I want to, well, the audience, you guys want to dive into a little bit further. But I think the first thing, just to maybe set the tone, what exactly is the difference between Mythical Games and the Mythos Foundation?
Yeah, so great question. Yeah, so the Mythos Foundation is a DAO, so it's totally decentralized. Mythos Foundation was set up a couple years ago by really a collection of companies. Obviously, Mythical being kind of one of the tenets, but they have representative collection of gaming companies from all around the world, and really it's to like bring the Web3 gaming into the hands of the masses. So that's kind of the mission of the DAO. The DAO is fully decentralized. It's lives and dies by the votes of the community. Where Mythical Games is a private, for-profit, technology gaming company that we hope to provide platform services for both our own games as well as future games and third-party games alike. So while the DAO we don't control, we're a part of it. We're part of the community, just like a lot of other holders. Where Mythical Games is actually an entity that's for profit.
Cool. And if you don't know, there's a Mythos Foundation's Telegram channel that I've shared multiple times for all of you to join. But you touched a little bit on Blancos. Obviously, kind of late last year, Mythical announced that Blancos is going to be shut down on PC and moving a bit more towards mobile. I guess, what was the reason for that? And do you have any learnings you can potentially provide with Academy participants?
Yeah, I think for Blancos, on the good is, I think it really proved out kind of the thesis around, we actually took a broader population survey a long time ago around, desirability for marketplace and game. I think that survey, we asked about 8,000 participants, would do like a marketplace and game. I think 72% of them resoundingly said yes. So, Blancos PC was kind of the first attempt at really realizing kind of the Web3 ethos all in one product. We saw, especially for participants who engaged with the Blancos marketplace, engagement was like through the roof. Monetization on the game was quite strong as well, and the game did pretty well. We were getting about $20 to $30 per user. The big problem with that game ultimately became scale was hard. With Steam not allowing kind of crypto games on their platform, and maybe they'll relax that over the years, we'll see. Our distribution channels are somewhat few and far between. We're able to get off Epic App Store, which, got us some free installs. But outside of that, we're really left to our own devices on acquiring customers. And the customer acquisition costs started to become in the $40 to $50 neighborhood. And if we're only able to get 20 or $30 out of them, it really started to put a damper on that product's growth. So, moving to our Gen 2 games, we kind of was like, all right, well, acquisition costs, again, maybe until Steam changes it. It's quite high on PC. Mobile is a little bit more well understood. There's a lot more channels, a lot more places to market in. Apple and Google started to signal that they'd be more okay with allowing blockchain games on their platform. So we kind of pushed our focus now to mobile and bringing a lot of those, philosophies and ethos into the mobile app that we had success with Blankos, and try to replicate that success, and have had with Rivals, I think you've seen with strong ability to scale and monetizations there, and a lot of the stuff I think that we had thought would be true on our game 2 is starting to show true in the metrics with respect to kind of having a marketplace in the game for other players to play, like players who engage with those the marketplace NFTs, like their monetization's way up, their engagement's way up, so I think overall we ultimately, I'd say the key learning for us to think about broadly as like, how am I going to acquire a user and at what cost? And for us, that math worked out best on mobile. Bigger market, bigger TAM to draw from. UA is cheaper and more well understood. So ultimately, I think that was the key learning for us, is moving more towards mobile. So not to say PC can't work. It's just our acquisition costs were superseded our revenue per those costs. So it didn't make sense for a long-term business for us to kind of continue on that dimension. Where we had having a lot of success on mobile.
Yeah, I presume Troy picked that up one of his forecast models. Just quickly for the audience, if you have any questions about anything Nick answers, just ping it in the chat and we can keep the conversation going. Very much for you, as we'll just keep going the direction with the questions that you've all kind of already pre-sent. I guess being can we say a US-based game studio, what kind of demographics of customers is Mythical generally kind of targeting, and I guess where do you see the future of business growth coming from?
Yeah, I think for us, obviously with the NFL game, it kind of follows in pattern with what you'd expect the NFL audience to be, at least for this first game, which is prominently US based, prominently kind of male, 30, 25 to 40-year-old. Within that product itself, we've got about 4 million installs. I think Madden's probably around 40 million installs. So I think for that product specifically, going into year 2, I think we still see a lot of opportunity and growth. For Mythical specifically, we kind of have 2 genres we're really focusing on. One is sports. We think we can kind of continue to be leaders on that. We up against a big incumbent with Madden and a brand that has 30 years of heritage behind it, but this is something we don't publicize, but I think we beat Madden on 3 days of their revenue over the last cycle. So hopefully we're able to fully take them on next year. That's the ambition. The other space we're really interested in exploring, at least internally, again, and I'll kind of widen it out here in a minute, is the party genre. So I think we've announced Blankos Block Party moving to mobile. The party genre, party knockout genre, is one of the only growing segments on mobile over the last couple of years. So that's a segment for us. I think we're super interested in. It still has some competition in the way that sports does, but it has a massive TAM, with Stumble Guys and Fall Guys out there. For Mythical, beyond our first party titles, we're starting to really look at how do we bring in Web 2, kind of older Web 2 games, and kind of fuse them with marketplaces. So we're trying to give our marketplace tech and some kind of existing products, as well as trying to think about how do we kind of supercharge other people's Web3 games, whether we co-dev them or whether we publish them or whether we, help them out on marketplace stuff. So, so a lot of you guys, get to know more of your projects. Maybe there's a fit on our Mythical platform at some point too. So that's exciting. So yeah, in short, kind of we'll continue to grow our first party business. We'll kind of expand and looking at kind of the Web 2 ecosystem as to ways to supercharge marketplaces in those games. Then we want to increase our third party on our platform as well.
Cool, thanks, Nick. Mike's just pinged through a question. I know he's got a couple games on Steam, but his question was, would you be a bigger believer, apologies if the siren is loud in the background, would you be a bigger believer in blockchain games for PCs, and do you think acquisition cost would be less if Steam changes its stance and allows them on the platform?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think the answer is yes. I'm a big believer in general in blockchain games on PC. I think the acquisition cost is something you have to think critically about. But I mean, we're certainly also starting to see a lot more cross-platform stuff, both on mobile and PC. Eventually, I'm a big believer, although they'll probably be a little late in their adoption. But we're starting to get signals from Xbox, Sony. Nintendo's probably going to lag, but even the console manufacturers also, whether it's filing patents or even in the conversations with us, also signaling. So I think it's a matter of not when, it's more a matter of not if, more when some of this stuff starts to open up. But yeah, I think there will be businesses there. It's just in the near term, it's easier for us to kind of scale on mobile than it is on PC personally. So, and certainly, yeah, once Steam allows them. They're one of the biggest marketplaces. So
cool. One of the guys from Evolute.
I've got a quick question. So if you are in talks with somebody like Xbox or PlayStation, how do you convince them that blockchain makes sense for gaming? That's what we hear a lot, like especially from traditional like game studios, or even if you apply for, I don't know, some sort of grants or something in like traditional world, they're always like, yeah, why are you using blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's blockchain. I mean, I think we're kind of getting through it. I mean, there was a time, and again, maybe we're kind of rounding the corner here, where it's kind of a bad term, and it's really just a technology at the end of the day. So talking to some of the like PlayStation and some of the other Microsoft and even Nintendo, where we've had conversations, a lot of it's just like education around like what the technology is, and a lot of from the case of like Nintendo, they're going to be worried about, like, is Timmy's like Zelda going to get stolen by like some malicious bad actor? So I think as we kind of work through it, and with Mythical, we've kind of gone through the motions on really being like above board on everything. Like we almost don't even market like NFTs to the broad market. So where we're able to show them, we have a trust and safety and a fraud team and all these other services in place to prevent people's assets getting stolen, and we have custodial wallets and a bunch of other stuff. I think that gives them a lot of comfort also, and the fact that like Apple and Google's kind of blessed, at least our implementation of a marketplace in a game also, I think has helped. We don't have a deal with any of those necessarily, but I think as we're starting to have more and more conversations, it feels like the tide's starting to change and all of that. And you start to see, I think even as recently, maybe a couple months ago, I think Sony just put out or applied for a bunch of patents around NFTs and games and whatnot. So I think it's coming. It's just it's probably going to be mobile first. Maybe Steam probably loosens up, and then the consoles will probably follow. But typically, I think you see a lot of the cutting edge stuff on like new business models within mobile that eventually makes its way back into the console space. I mean, even look at like free to play and how mobile games are operating kind of in a live operated service. And now if that compared to like, console games, a lot of those monetization mechanics have now made their way back into like big box products. So I think that adoption curve will continue. It might be a couple of years down the road still.
Cool. Yeah, I guess you answered a couple questions around, I guess, our next section of Web3 gaming. Before Toby quickly jumps in, I think a good kind of next question would be, how do you think traditional gaming companies will start using blockchain over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I certainly think as for Mythical, we're trying to really crack the nut of like, we believe NFTs or marketplaces can add kind of this new revenue dimension to gaming. I think as we continue to prove that out, it's a very compelling I'd say argument for a lot of games. Like, if you had a marketplace where players can own the assets and trade them amongst each other, and turns out they're more engaged than ever and actually spend more money in their game. I think like as we get more on those case studies out, and as we get more success stories out beyond just a few in the space, I think it'll, the snowball will pick up speed quite quickly. So I think, probably shows up at least in, traditional games, probably in the way, like, I don't know if we'll see like mass token adoptions in all the game. Maybe that's a little bit further down, but I think at least this notion of, because we have analogies in games already through like market, through auction houses and whatnot, but definitely think like a marketplaces in games not super foreign to gamers or even game makers alike. So I'd say it's probably going to start there. As you get into like the deeper like Web3 stuff with tokens and everything else, maybe that's a little bit more delayed, but I could definitely see a world where, start with some VCs, people are able to kind of buy and sell, game or assets in their games. I think that's probably where it'll start, and then maybe it expands from there. But
Cool. Toby, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. One question already got answered, but I I have a similar question with regards to not maybe so much Xbox and the platforms, but more like the game studios. Like you said, you want to take Web2 stuff and supercharge it, for example, with a marketplace to infuse it. Like we had similar talks in a very small scale in our town, like getting game studios and talking with them, and we saw there's a lot of education to be done, like on blockchain first. But what's your strategy in terms of like, how do you acquire this? Is that all under kind of one roof for you guys, that you already have these game studios, like you have a network of game studios that you talk to, and then you have a pool of stuff where you're like, hey, this could be cool here? Or how does that matching work from like Web2 games you're interested in to put, for example, a marketplace solution in, and kind of a business model that comes out of that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something we're in super early days or early innings on, to answer your question. But yeah, I mean, I think how we think about it, at least in the early stages, is, at least for us, kind of Mythical. We want to kind of continue to expand out on the marketplace. And we believe marketplace in games is, it's doing great for Rivals, and we think, it has a home in several other types of genres. There's certainly genres I think that lend themselves better to it than others, like a puzzle game, which is kind of fairly like solo in nature, like maybe harder to envision what a marketplace looks like versus say like a card game or a TCG or a 4X game. I think a lot of it is when we, and Troy's actually been part of a lot of these conversations. A lot of the conversations we start to talk about from a marketplace perspective is, all right, if we take an existing game, whether it's a Web2 game or even a Web3 game that wants to put a marketplace, is like, we think a lot about like, where's the liquidity and where's really the demand coming from? And the demand can come from like any number of factors, but I think annotating out like what's going to drive the demand for these assets. So in the course of a card game, it's pretty well understood. It's like, players need cards for the decks, and maybe there's a new collection or a new set that gets released and players want to go after that. There's other ways we start thinking about, increasing like demand. For example, on Rivals, we just released kind of this recipe system where, players can take old NFTs and craft them into to create kind of a new NFT. But I think it's kind of it's really important to, some games are going to lend themselves better than others, and really thinking about, okay, if you put a marketplace in, like, where does that demand come from? Where does the demand come from for those assets? And just how does the kind of player to player value or value exchange work between different kinds of segments of players?
I get it, but how does the matching work? Like that is kind of deeper analysis in the second step, I feel. But how does the matching work? Like, how do you get to these games to have these first talks to even think about these models?
Oh, you mean just like how do we, like, the deal flow? How do we kind of get inbounds?
Yeah. How do you approach that? Like, is there a sector you search in for specific games? Like saying, I'm looking for studios that do multiplayer games, or is it just the games within your network that you do deeper analysis on, or how do you do that?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, kind of how we started. We actually used, actually Troy and I recently did this maybe a couple weeks ago. So yeah, for kind of where Mythical's at, it's probably helpful to kind of tell you where we're at in our journey. So Rivals, we've had a lot of success. We had started initially on the web. Through the in-app experience, now we just actually launched selling in-app. So now we have buy, selling, and kind of that full loop realized. So for now, we kind of proved it out in a couple games as well as Blanco's PC. And for us, it's like, all right, now we want to go wider kind of with the Web2 audience. So we actually started initially kind of taking a look at data AI and taking a look at kind of the top games, but from like a DAO and revenue perspective, and kind of just went really through, I think we went through like 1,000 games. Having been in the industry, mobile games, for like 15 years, we kind of knew a lot of people at a lot of different studios. So we're kind of just able to pick up the phone and be like, hey, we're seeing like 20% lift in Rivals. Like, is that something that's interesting to you? So we actually just started. I was out at GDC on Monday, kind of starting this roadshow. So we're kind of in the roadshow kind of phase right now, while we start to solicit interested parties, and then we'll kind of take it and pick a couple kind of in the friends and family, and hopefully have a couple use cases that we can prove, and then hopefully commercialize it after that. That's kind of the, I don't know if that fully answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Yep.
Cool. I think we take one step back. I see Akin's kind of got a question from the previous kind of topics we were touching on. But what was the biggest difference for you switching from PC games to mobile games in the mobile game sector that you did not expect? For example, audience target, production time.
Biggest difference. Yeah, I wasn't around for the PC, Luis Blanco's world. I think, I'm trying to think. They did not expect. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was any like gotcha. I don't know, Troy. Is there anything that you can call out? I'm trying why I rack my brain.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I don't know about not expected. I think the biggest change is that most of the players on the PC were Web3 knowledgeable, right? They had to go through it. They had to navigate a wallet to figure out how to get and play the game. And as a result, right, there was a lot of speculation, and so values were very volatile, and there was a lot of players who were buying assets and not playing the game.
Yeah.
And I think we have exactly the opposite in mobile. Like, people don't have to worry about the wallet. Most of them don't know that it's an NFT. And they're all playing. There are very, very few players who are just engaging in the marketplace. Almost all our purchases are going to be playing the game.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the one thing, I don't know if it's unexpected, but it's definitely real. I mean, we even saw just even today is like where there's money involved, like exploiters, like people trying to figure out how to game it. And I'd say the one thing to be a little more cautious of, like in the Web 2 world where the economies are much more closed, like if there's a bug or whatever, or you have a botched release, like the impact to the economy could kind of usually be rolled back, or you can kind of like isolate it to a few users where if you kind of get it wrong, like, there's a hole in the economy and people can go mint 1,000 NFTs, like, yeah, people get pretty upset pretty quick. So it's harder to take back stuff that's on the blockchain because it's all kind of real and it's in people's wallets, and sometimes you're not even able to take it back. So I think kind of an extra layer of like what you put out is almost permanent in a lot of cases, I think requires kind of a second level of just like QA and just, safety kind of pushing it out, versus Web 2 world, which is like, you might have botch release, all right, well, let's roll back and who cares? But now you have like 500 mints that you have to deal with or whatever. So I think when there's, kind of economic, say, gain to be had, you get a lot of people trying to break the system and, mess around with events or whatever. So I'd say, that's a little bit more ripe for, I would say, like, scammers is not probably the word, but maybe some bad actors to try to come in and exploit, areas where you have weakness or vulnerability.
Cool. Before I touch on Sukhmita and Befar's question, I guess a little bit still about Web3 gaming, kind of with your expertise that you've kind of come from quite a traditional background in gaming into Web3, and with Blancos and I guess NFL Rivals kind of experience under the belt now. Do you think traditional gamers actually care about owning kind of in-game assets or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and in reference that study, we did a 8,000 person-ish Gen Pop survey, and I think we saw 72% of the people, care about having, marketplace or a marketplace in their game. So I definitely think gamers care, given the choice of like, I can play a sports game or an FPS, or I might win a gun or an NFT or an asset that, I could have either use or have some sort of residual value out of my effort, time, or money, I think is quite compelling. So I would say, I think for all evidence we've seen so far, it would be a resounding yes.
Perfect. I guess moving on to Sukhmeet's question, it came in before Befar raised his hand. With Unity's business model changes in Horizon and 30% take of in-game purchases by Apple and Google, I guess, can you expand a little bit on Mythical's strategy to tackle this market change?
Yeah, for yeah, I mean the Unity stuff, I think we're also kind of processing. Yeah, actually, how the marketplace kind of works for now with Apple and Google, maybe this will change. Is, and for those that aren't familiar with it, right now in app we actually do mark up the asset 30%, which is definitely not super ideal for the customer perspective, but that is a way, for Apple and Google to still, take their rake. We are supplying them with a lot of data, and we actually have worked with them a little bit on some of their policies and are continuing to work through that. It'd be nice to not kind of have to mark it up that much because it's not super great for the consumer perspective. But yeah, I definitely think, we're looking at other ways to, working with them to figure out a way to maybe not have to do it as much, but say we're still in the early innings of all that.
Cool. And I think the follow-up was, is there also a discussion at Mythical about moving to Unreal or kind of in-house game engines or a hybrid model?
Yeah, and I think, oops, sorry, I've got a pop-up. Yeah, I think a lot of, I actually think we have some Unreal, actually, some Unreal integration already. I'm not sure the extent of it. I could kind of double click on that, but yeah, I think a lot of our tech we would hopefully over time, yeah, open it up to almost any engine. We started on Unity just because that's where Rivals was at, but we do have some demos as well with Unreal, but I'm not sure that the full extent of the API can get back to the audience on that.
Perfect. Bethel, you've had your hand raised for quite a while.
No, awesome. Just wanted to touch on the topic on the secondary marketplace as an enhancement to a game, can also be an enhancement to revenue. What we have a challenge in is basically balancing out the in-app purchase revenue model with the openness of the secondary marketplace existing in total, and not cannibalizing our own revenue with having this opportunity for the players to get their items, not from us, but from people that playing the game. Yeah. I would love to understand your approach there, because I think NFL Rivals have probably the same exact problem, not problem, but challenge. Would be cool to hear.
Yeah, we can certainly, we could even spend longer on your specific case, but yeah, for Rivals, that was definitely a big concern for us originally as well, was like, what's the cannibalization of primary? There's some things that we've done with respect to the marketplace, and there's other things we do with respect to kind of the live op programming to kind of prevent some of that. So for on the marketplace side, for example, we actually don't expose, and I think it's like a week or 2 weeks for like new content. We actually don't expose it within app for about a week or two. Players can still go to the marketplace and transact it freely, but that was one area that we tried to have just new content really only come from primary, and obviously over the course of like a week or two, we kind of open it to everybody. So we do a little bit of like curation around new content and when users are exposed to that. And then from the kind of to make on the live ops side, it's, how we've kind of structured it is, we kind of have these right now like events or kind of our events, and we have this like bonus system that we can then bonus some of the older content. So even though we have like stopped using it, we still try to find utility or make it relevant within the context of the existing season. As we started to add more features, like I think I mentioned the one we have a crafting one coming up, that's also to kind of tackle the piece of like old content maybe having less utility than kind of the new content. So I'd say it goes into a lot of questions about like, when you think of new features, how do you think about creating demand for kind of the older content you're not selling, so that you can kind of still kind of circulate that through the ecosystem and kind of participate on those rates accordingly. So I'd say it's a little bit in like content curation on the front end, and then it's a lot of it's really based on live ops programming on the backside.
Cool. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
I think moving a little bit more to kind of Mythical and Web3, and potentially there'll be a little bit, I'm sure, about Mythos and the Mythos chain in here as well. Just to give everyone a little bit of context, obviously, Nick is at Mythical and not Mythos, so if he isn't able to answer the questions fully, that is why, but I'm sure he's going to try his best. We've discussed it already. But before I jump into that, yeah, I guess one of the questions that came, a predetermined question, was given Mythical Games' studio reputation as a leader in Web3 gaming technology, how do you balance gamer satisfaction with economic viability in game development? It's quite a mouthful. I hope you got that.
Yeah, it's again a great question. And I'd say as always, this push and pull between like gamers wanting the game for free and the businesses wanting to make money, and kind of that intersection is, is where I'd say there's always a push and pull between the community and the business. But yeah, I think in general, we have a lot of PMs really doing analysis around, again, kind of our sources and things. So obviously, like what are the tools and levers we have within the app to create, a demand side for these assets, and then on the flip side, it's like how many of those assets are we kind of putting out into the economy, and that is kind of and say it's like an art. I'd say it kind of requires constant upkeep and supervision. So like a good example is like on Rivals, we kind of take a look at a lot of like, how much DAU we have, how much installs do we expect to, we're bringing in on a daily basis, how much installs do we expect to bring in kind of, next week or monthly, but really thinking of anchoring we do internally to try to figure out like how many rares should we get out based on this DAU, how many epics, how many legendaries, and so forth. So I'd say it requires a lot of pretty strong like economy, I'd say oversight and tools to track kind of the supply sinks and supplies. But yeah, I won't say there's like a one size fit all. Outside of it, really just comes down to like how much demand is in the system and how much supply you have, and trying to make sure that those ratios are healthy. And then when they kind of get out of sorts, like in Rivals we have a lot of a lot of supply. We probably were a little overzealous in some of the cards. So as we think of kind of these newer features, some of the design goals we have specifically targeted, like, all right, we need to create some more demand side for some of these older cards. Because there was too many in this and too much in the system. So I'd say it requires kind of a constant, just you kind of need to keep your eyes on it every day. So
perfect. I guess moving a little bit more to the Mythos chain, we can quickly take Mike's question before jumping into that. Does Mythical more strongly believe in original IP or licensing existing IP as a strategy going forward?
Yeah, I think I think there's a home for both. I think that's kind of what we're deploying right now. We have some licensed product, obviously with Rivals. We have another game out by another developer called Nitro Nation. It's kind of more on a soft launch, which also has licensed content. Blankos is kind of our own homegrown IP, which we also believe has high upside. So I don't think it's going to be all or one or nothing. The existing IP stuff, with the case of like NFL, there's a lot of people like NFL. So from a cold start perspective and getting kind of fans in, we were able to kind of grow, get a pretty engaged user base, pretty quickly with Rivals that had a high affiliation towards NFL. So, and I think, with respect to the NFL, it also kind of helped kind of prove that, at least for in our case, like blockchain's not this big scary thing that all the brands should be afraid of. So could definitely obviously help getting users into your game. Comes at a cost. You have MGs and rev shares and whatever you have to pay those providers. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be an all or one nothing going forward. I think we'll have I think we've found success in sports. I think we have desire to do more sports leagues and more sports, and we've had some success doing our own IP stuff as well. So I think we'll continue on both trajectories, as well as looking at third parties that are doing either or.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. So I guess what were your main considerations with the development of kind of the Mythos chain? What was the rationale behind it?
Yeah, probably a better question for Cam, who's our VP of blockchain, because I wasn't around it. I think from a developer perspective, again, I wasn't around for the lineage of it, but at least from a developer perspective, obviously one is, yeah, it needs to be able to scale, with respect to the demand of your DAU. Two is, yeah, safety is obviously a concern. Is it going to go up and down all the time? Like having a 6-hour outage of in the case of Solana, not super ideal. So I think uptime was also important for gaming. And then I think for Mythical's case, like gasless transactions, super important if we're going to update metadata a bunch because players are upgrading their cards. Like it's going to have to suck to sign a signature every time or pay gas fees or pay $3 every time you want to update. Mahomes is throwing speed or whatever. So again, I think kind of low friction from the end user perspective was high on the list. Gasless was also important. Scalability, uptime, security. I'd say the others. Cam might have other specific ones that were important to him, but at least as a developer, those were important to me.
Perfect. And I guess how important is the Mythos token for Mythical Games' vision? And how does it relate to third-party games? Probably
Yeah.
also for Cam.
Yeah, obviously super important. Obviously, it's kind of the protocol token that powers all of our gaming. So, I'd say it's incredibly important for us what we're doing. Kind of is the backbone for everything else that it sits on. But yeah, so I think for all of our games, we'll adopt a form of it. Obviously, in games, Apple still not allow you to show like cryptocurrency within the context of an in-app game. So we kind of had this somewhat extraction with kind of a VC that we use in gaming, and hopefully over time, Apple and Google will be more open to actually having cryptocurrencies in game. But we'll kind of see how that goes.
Cool. And from, I guess, perspective of governance, I know John touched on a little bit about kind of getting the community a bit more engaged. Is that something that you'll be going forward with as well with the Mythos token?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it'll nice thing about all the Nova Wall and everything, like all the governance is right there, which is super exciting versus having to do a snapshot and logging in. And if you're with the ETH solution, not as ideal. Yeah, super excited to have it all right there, people to vote on.
Cool. Lucas, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I got a quick question because you just mentioned governance. We've heard a lot from different Web3 companies that this is like a huge sector which you can use as like an argument for Web3, that you can have players basically deciding to a certain degree in which direction the game goes. I don't know, imagine World of Warcraft and you can decide if a mage gets buffed or nerfed. Like, are you trying to deploy something like that as well, or are you happy because you are doing a lot of like customer acquisition, right? Like if the players decide to suddenly change the game a lot and you have all those prediction models, it could like throw everything out the window. Like, how are you trying to approach that?
Yeah, it's super interesting. From our perspective, at least for Rivals right now, we are kind of, we don't have like governance as far as like what features the players are voting on, let's say, with respect to our game, but we definitely do engage our community on Discord quite a bit. I think it's super interesting having like voting and giving players voting on features or whatever. I think it'd also be cool. I'd say we're not quite there yet from at least from a company perspective. So right now, a lot of our kind of the way in which we survey, whether it's features or feedback, will be in the form of like AMA or in our Discords, and working with our community managers to put out a few options. And we still try to embrace what the community wants. Now, there's always times. Like, we'll take a case of like defense as an example on Rivals. That's our number. If you look at our reviews, everyone's like, "Oh, we want defense in the game." And I think defense, if you were to put it to a vote, people would say, yes, I want a defense in my football game, because why not? I have offense, defense should be there. When you start thinking about what does it mean what does defense mean to you? I think we'll probably get, even on this call, 10 different versions. Some people want it automatically played. I want to be able to switch all my player and like go make tackles. I want to set up more of like a GM style. I want to set up a couple modes. So even within the context of a feature, I think there's wide range of like outcomes from a community perspective. So what we've been doing more specifically to, I think, a high degree of success, which I think is maybe something for you guys to consider, is for features that I'd say are somewhat contentious or have a higher degree of, say community feedback, good, bad, otherwise. We actually created within the context of our Rivals Live Ops, we created a new brand called Pigskin Labs, where we actually flight kind of stuff in development to try to get like community feedback on it and try to get it right and get their feedback in and make iterations. So we've found a way to like kind of through events release new features, and we kind of market them as temporary so that if we need to take them away, they're, one, it's easier, and two, we don't have this big community uproar around like, well, you put it in, I took it out. So we got them a lot more comfortable with kind of this experimentation vertical that we've used a high degree of success that has allowed us to put features in and take them out and kind of change them, as well as we do a lot of A/B testing and other stuff as well. But sometimes we just want to put it out for like our most engaged community and kind of build alongside with them and get their feedback and kind of be able to tweak it and, and sometimes completely redo it if it misses the marks. So
maybe a hot take on this, because like many Web3 people might not agree with that, but I think decentralizing everything in balancing, or a lot of parts in balancing, might even be a bad thing. If we think back to World of Warcraft and how it kind of, everyone was screaming for it to be more accessible, and now like 10 years later they scream that it developed too far away from their core IP. So I think it's an interesting trade-off, what you decentralize and what you don't.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool, thanks. I guess you've touched on it a little bit already, Nick, but is Mythical planning to create an ecosystem of Web3 games under Mythical IP? And I guess the follow-up for that is, how would you, in particular not Mythical, but how would you want a third-party game to enrich the Mythos ecosystem?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, I think long-term, for sure, 100%. I mean, that's would be our ambition. Definitely want to continue bringing on more games onto the Mythical platform and really supercharging. Like, I think making games is hard enough. I think we're all kind of attest to that. That combined with everything else going on in the Web3 is like makes it even that much harder. So I think for us, we definitely want, that's where we'll probably start really leaning into over the next 6 months-ish, and really starting to explore more like how do we kind of widen our our involvement in the Web3 space. As far as like the types of games, I mean, ultimately, we just want, I think, like super high quality content that, it could come in lots of different genres. I think for us specifically, I'd say for now, especially genres that can really lend towards like player-to-player interactions and trading, and kind of this whole idea of, I have an NFT and want to, improve it and, level it up and, maybe trade it or sell it down the line for another one. But I'd say we'll probably lean heavy in genres that really kind of support kind of these player-to-player like ecosystems, if you will, or economies. But I wouldn't say it's like one size fits all. Honestly, like if there's an amazing game that has some awesome tokenomics thing or something really interesting, or just a very high quality game that maybe even has a little bit lighter Web3 elements in there, I think we'll look at it all. I think ultimately it's gamers want to play fun games. So yeah, there's staking and other stuff people can do, but ultimately they're going to stay for the experience of the game. So it really is just going to come down to trying to get great games on our platform, whether that's internal, second party, third party, whatever flavors that takes. I think we'll look at it all.
Cool. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
I'm going to open the floor now to kind of all of you. If anybody has any questions, it'll be great. You can fire away. And then we've got 3 questions at the end that are a bit more advice-driven, asking Nick for advice. So we'll save that for then. But yeah, Toby, over to you. Start away.
Sorry for taking up so much screen time.
No.
But if it's like I asked before, like what is your way to kind of find these like gems? You say like that fits perfectly on your scale, and you said like it's you have your network, you look at revenue. Like obviously here we'd all wish to be kind of in the top 100 list of these games. We, as for matter of fact, we aren't, right? So that's quite a like. How does that translate? Like, what would be like? I think in your strategy, we're kind of the ones that are on the intersection between like understanding of blockchain and also in the game design part. So I would like to know kind of what would be your like perfect outcome of the academy. And obviously there is no guarantee for anything. I'm super clear on that. But what are you searching for? And I'd understand that a bit more in a more specific thing towards like these to your strategy with with third party studios.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I mean, a lot of great questions in there. Yeah, I'd say, I mean, from really respect of, there's even with respect, like, the problem with a lot of those like bigger games, like frankly, is like a lot of them are still too risky for them to like take a shot on it. It's like you could have a game that does $50 million, but like you're probably not gonna like risk your full game to like try to put a marketplace in it. So we'll see if those show up. But I think out of the academy, I mean, one is obviously kind of increasing our kind of network of passionate developers that want to make games, and two, I think it's really around like, I think we want to get Mythical into a spot where a lot of the learnings that we've learned, whether it's econ design or whether it's putting in the plumbing for marketplaces or facilitating kind of what's it mean for kind of value exchange amongst like player cohorts, like a lot of like I'd say the principles and technology and concepts. I think we want to create systems, tools, and processes to really make it a lot easier for people like yourselves to come in and kind of bolt on these experiences in a way that is a lot faster than just be able to probably do it on their own. So I would still say is finding developers that are very passionate, where kind of they have like a strong engine, and what I mean by engine is like a game that they really believe in, and Mythical can then kind of add kind of the gasoline on it to push it quicker and faster. So I think we'll be trying to productize stuff that, whether it's the marketplace or on guest account wallets or these type of programs, so to ultimately make you guys be able to get down the road quicker. So I'd say really just trying to find small teams who are passionate about what they're doing, that have great ideas, that maybe need a little extra technology support, or even just even advice, whether it's econ or hey, how did you guys do this, or what are some pitfalls. So yeah, I think it's just kind of continue to curate that group and see how we can go faster together. So.
Cool. And with that group, so let's say that you have successfully found something that makes sense for you. Would that then live under? I'm not sure if that's even fixed right now. So, but would that live under the IP then? And you would say like there's an ecosystem of games that kind of is labeled under a certain IP, or is it kind of a loose thing that kind of shows traction on a certain chain? So what are kind of the metrics or the optimization criteria for these choices?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely want to find more games to live on the Mythos chain themselves, whether they're published directly by us or whether we provide technology. I think is open for discussion. I don't think there's one or the other that I think we'd be open to both. Somewhere in the way, like we actually have partnered with a group, Creative Mobile. They do all the development on a game called Nitro Nation, which is kind of out in a variety of like kind of soft launch criteria, but they still develop it. We kind of help them out a little bit from econ balancing, and we're starting to work with them on kind of getting in-game marketplace, all the other stuff in it. But so I wouldn't say it's like one size fits all. I'd say the ambition is to get more games within the Mythos chain, and that could come in the form of one, us paying for them, or two, maybe providing a grant, or three, just even providing support. So I'd say we're still early innings. I mean, we just have Rivals and Nitro Nation for now, but I think the intention is we'd love to have another 6 games by the end of the year that are kind of building on the chain or on the chain. And yeah, I think to your question, I think we're looking at from like a marketplace perspective, they're like older Web 2 games we could even bring over. So I'd say that's a slightly different work stream than getting kind of new games on the platform.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks. I think Sukmeed's got a question he was trying to ask earlier. If you guys raise your hand, then I can just facilitate the questions.
Thanks. So I was trying to gather an impression of which are the genres that Mythical is trying to adopt. They are in sports right now, and they are with Nitro, and with like what's the 2024 and 25 looking for them, like RPG or?
Yeah, I mean, I think internally, again, and this is where I think, you guys probably could help out. I think internally, we're probably going to stick to just sports and probably just party. I think that's kind of, those are two big genres. That's probably more than we even have hands to do right now. But I certainly think from like, and Christoph asked when Mystical Scytale Gaming Fun. Yeah, I'm all for that. So we should chat about that. But yeah, I think from a from a genre perspective, like RPGs, 4X, card games. I mean, I think the only one that's a little bit hard is like kind of puzzle. But outside of that, I'm sure there's even a puzzle Web3 behemoth out there, in the world of Candy Crush out there that just hasn't been figured out. But yeah, I'd say for us, first party is probably mostly sports and maybe like party knockout. But I think we would love to have, RPGs, a card game, TCG, or even other genres out there.
The follow-up to that would be like you guys are in NFL Rivals. So NFL Rivals you see mostly around North America. Or is it, my impression could be wrong, because I'm just thinking NFL Rivals will be mostly common in North America, maybe Finland or somewhere else.
Yeah.
It will also be there. So what about similar sports game in other geographic regions?
Great question. Yeah. So, yeah, I think we'd love to do. I mean, the problem with Rivals is it's very US centric, or NFL Rivals. Certainly, I think we'd love to do soccer, football. I mean, even like cricket, as an example, could be another huge sport. But yeah, I think what we're seeing on Rivals, just on the marketplace alone, is incredibly compelling to the point we'd love to do other sports. Fortunately, like sports is a little bit more expensive because you have to have players involved, and especially when you look at like soccer with UEFA and FIFA and all the other ones, like there's a lot of different bodies and players to negotiate the rights for. So I think sports has a little bit of a lead time, just especially if you're doing a license because of all the contracts you have to get in spot. But I would love to find other sports that have more international appeal than that, or even have less seasonality than football does, or than American football does.
Thank you.
So yeah, if there's a sports game you want to make, we should chat, because
Russell.
Yeah, I can think of two sports actually that do quite well: snooker and darts. They would be really cool to do. My question for you, Nick, was like looking at gaming meeting blockchain, and obviously we're quite early days now.
Mm-hmm. What's
the most exciting thing you anticipate coming out of this new future of gaming?
Yeah, and that, I don't know if it's so much. I think it's more of a philosophy, and I don't quite know how to synthesize my thought around it. But I think what's really interesting, whether it's NFTs or even I think someone brought up like, hey, token and governance around gaming. I think this will be kind of the next evolution of gaming, where like players kind of get closer to the business than they've have historically. Like it's always been very kind of divorced. Like players put a lot of money into the games, put a lot of time in the games, but when they're done with the game, they don't really have much on the way of to take away from it. So what I find, I think, is really compelling is I think it really kind of aligns players closer to the business than ever before. And certainly if we get to the spot where, you have a token that governs all your games and players can, kind of get into the token and, vote on features and direction of the game and all that stuff. I think that's like a whole nother world. But I think it'll kind of be the next evolution of really getting gamers more invested in games. And now that, the incentives are a little bit more aligned, like, hey, I want my game assets to thrive with the game and appreciate or whatever with the game. We have to use value, say loosely, but I think having the incentives a lot more aligned than ever before, and allowing players to have something for their time or money on the other side of it, I think it's super compelling. So I think given the option of game A, where as a gamer I can come in and sure maybe I'll get that rare helmet that I could, sell for $50 and take that money and buy other stuff I want, or take it out of the game if I want to go to do another game, I think is quite compelling, and I don't see how it doesn't become adopted given the option of doing that versus not. Oh, that answers your question much, Russell, but
Yeah, no, it does. It's perfect. It's very much in lines with what I was thinking. I think obviously owning your in-game assets is going to be a massive advantage to gaming. It's I just don't think that the Web 2 space necessarily seeing it quite yet.
yeah.
They're not seeing it the way that we see it, because we're immersed in the space. We can see the big advantages of it.
Yeah.
The different demographics around the world of gamers have very different reasons for why they play games.
That's right.
Obviously, your game's mainly US based, which tend to be a wealthy sort of base of player.
Yeah.
So their reasons for playing is because they enjoy playing games. Whereas what we're seeing in developing nations in Southeast Asia is that they're actually playing for financial gain.
Yeah.
So they're much more pro sort of a blockchain adoption than the gamers that we're used to in developed nations. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's kind of the old way to earn growth.
Cool. Apostle, we over to you.
Hi, Nick. I just had a question on top of having a token. What are your thoughts on having points? So in-game points. So if somebody completes a daily quest or even a monthly quest, something alongside the tournaments, or having it like a tournament. So basically points that are not tradable but accumulate over time. Maybe on like a monthly basis, like a seasonal pass or so, just to keep gamers, give gamers this sort of progression and potentially force them to stay on the platform, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, and I think reward vectors. They don't need to always be tokenized currency. Actually, in Rivals, this is actually Troy's design, so I'll give him credit to that. One of the most successful ways right now we use to reward players in events is actually kind of this monthly seasonal currency that we kind of cycle in each month. And actually the currency is not tokenized, it gets flushed at the end of each season. It's definitely a way for players to kind of gauge their progress on the monthly content. We then obviously allow those players to convert those currencies into an NFT or to a limited edition. But yeah, I certainly don't think every currency needs to be tokenized. I think as long as there's a way for which players are measuring their progress, and in return can get something out of it. I try to think of Web3 just in general as is there ways to enhance the experience? So one idea. I think you mentioned Battle Pass. That's I think kind of interesting. No one's done it yet. We haven't done it yet. Is the idea of if a Battle Pass even was an NFT? You're gaining progress on it, and then at the end of it, you could either exchange it for a bunch of rewards, or you could sell it to another player, and let them you monetize your engagement, but letting them get the rewards is also interesting. So, I think just in IGCs, in-game currencies, we use a bunch of them in Rivals. None of them are tokenized actually, and it's I think it's still an important part of the game. So I'm not saying they all have to be tokenized for it to be successful. I think this is the takeaway.
Yeah. Befa?
I was wondering how you see the future of gaming ecosystem in the case that would you think that's going to be a winner takes it all scenario, 5 winners, let's say the game stores we're seeing Steam, Epic Games, etc., or is it going to be more and more decentralized within smaller communities, maybe gaming ecosystem for a niche of a game? Let's say Mythical Game is more focused on sports games, or this ecosystem is more on this genre. Would love to hear your thought about it, because I feel like more and more gaming ecosystem pops out and want to create this ecosystem around their games or external games. So they're more and more acting as a more a publisher, I would say. So the USP of a gaming an ecosystem gets more aligned. Like technical support at some point, I would say everyone can support technical side. The tech gonna evolve everywhere enough, so it's not gonna be enough USP. So what remains, what I think is network. So players, developers, but also maybe interconnectivity, right? Okay, if I publish my RPG game into this RPG ecosystem, I have much more leverage than if I publish my RPG game into a sports ecosystem. Would love to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd be curious. Yeah, I think there's ecosystem by genres kind of interesting. I mean, I definitely think between, and we even have to do that definitely within kind of our own ecosystem. We've talked a lot about interoperability between games. I think, with respect to like, marketplaces or whatever. I think it could be super compelling or even interesting to like, maybe you're done with a game in that ecosystem and you want to, play another game within it, being able to, trade assets between the games. I think it's interesting. Obviously, you'd have to kind of figure out how the value carries from one game to another. But yeah, I mean, my hope is, over time, at least we can get like more and more kind of like marketplaces that are run by, the game teams within games, much like we are Rivals. Because I think ultimately it's going to be whatever has the least amount of friction will probably, will probably win. It's definitely, I think we have desires to like figure out like, hey, how do you do cross-trade gaming and interoperability, and like what does that all mean? And how do you go from a racing game to a sports game? And I think we're still very early in the nascent stages of all that thinking, but I definitely think there's probably a lot of opportunity in that direction that we haven't really explored yet.
Cool. Mike, just before you ask your question, we have, I think it is 8 minutes left. So just a heads up there for everyone.
Yeah, so I'll go quick. So I assume you have a lot of data on your player and your player base. And my curiosity is, do you know for a fact what other things they like? So for example, if they like football, will they like tennis? If they, who's like, we see who's playing games like Rocket League and other games like that. And there's some crossover, but I'm wondering, do you have any actual stats on your player base and other things that they like or other IPs they may like?
Yeah, we actually do. We have run several surveys. I don't know. I know I could actually probably poll it and report back. I don't know, Troy, do you remember any of that stuff? I know we have a bunch of personas. I don't know. Is there anything?
Yeah, and I could open them up. I mean, there are games that those players, that adjacencies generally create this kind of leverage for you, right? Like that you want to look for. What are games that my audience is playing? What are other games that my audience is playing that I can kind of leverage mechanics or needs from in my game? So we use a tool called Solstin, which is like a player psychographics tool. And it goes a next layer down from like what are the genres that players are playing, and it really looks more at like what are the needs that those games are fulfilling for them. So if you like abstract that and think about Rivals, right? Like there's leadership, there's competition, there's mastery. And so the other games that those players like to play aren't necessarily genre adjacent. They may be a shooter game, but those shooter game will encapsulate like those kind of persona types like mastery and leadership and competition. So I don't know.
It's more about the gameplay triggers than the actual theme of the game. Basically.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's what are the emotional needs that players are fulfilling by playing those games, and like that. Like I don't love personas, and I don't love the kind of psychographic way of looking at consumer insights. But they're often gems that come from insights that come from looking at what are the specific needs that those players are fulfilling by playing your game, that can help you figure out like how to optimize the features you have in your game. You can also, again, within tools, I talked about data AI in my session. Now Sensor Tower, which is the big competitor with data AI, has bought data AI. So if you have either of those tools, you have access to the same. And they have all the adjacency information there where you can literally go in and say, people who are playing NFL Rivals, what are the top 3 other games that those players are also often playing? But that often doesn't tell you the motivations for playing. You can just see like, oh, they're also playing Fall Guys. Well, why are they playing Fall Guys? And then looking the next level deeper, like what is the emotional need? What is the need that game is fulfilling for them? Can help you understand in your game how to accentuate. Even sometimes it's just in marketing language. We've had some good success using those insights to optimize our UA campaigns to speak specifically to the leadership vector. We found by like adding elements of calling to the player's need to be a leader, like whatever, manage your team was a more effective UA than like kick the field goal for the kind of player that was looking to play our game.
Very cool. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Troy. There we go. Nick's just typed a message there. So we're going to move a bit more on to some advice questions that have been asked by the audience. I guess, Nick, what guidance would you provide to new indie game developers entering the Web3 gaming space?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of stuff we've kind of hit on, but yeah, definitely to think about. I mean, you're going to go in and spend a lot of time to obviously invest in the game. Yeah, but definitely think about your TAM, like where you're getting the players from, and ultimately, yeah, just like how are you going to make the game experience the least amount of friction for players to come in and experience, whether it's NFTs or tokens or whatnot. So think a lot about just that funnel and converting, customers or ads into players. I think is probably, ultimately you want a business, a small game, that you can start growing over time, and just kind of thinking about how that's going to mature, like who you're going to go after first, how you're going to reach them, who you're going to go after second, and give a little bit of thought to the business around it, and not just kind of rush in and hope it all works out.
Cool. There's one more question on my side, so if anybody has one more question after that, I'm sure we have time for it. If not, then we can also just call it. But what is your advice for a game studio that is looking to transition into game publishing?
Yeah, we should double click on what we define as publishing, because I think publishing means a lot. It could mean live ops, could just mean UA. So under that question, there's probably a lot to double click on. But yeah, I think again, kind of oftentimes the biggest mistake we see is just if you're going to go into a publishing business, like you're going to put capital, you're going to expend capital to try to make that back. So I think depending on how you engage, whether it's during a soft launch, you should be looking at ROAS and how does that ROAS scale across time. It's probably going to be important. But I think publishing is really about like how do you kind of bring games to scale, and a lot of that's going to come down to like your acquisition cost and kind of the ROAS against that cost. On which to choose versus which not. But if there's more specific publishing question, we can double click on it.
Yeah. Are there any more questions from the audience? We can say 2 minutes. I'm sure Nick, his vocal cords are running. But hopefully you have no big calls coming up. Okay, cool. There we go.
Yeah, since we have still 2 minutes, about the publishing, maybe it would be cool to maybe talk as well about live ops. As you're also entering that area right now with our game, would love to like hear your thoughts, like maybe what to avoid, what to not, like what is your biggest learning for like live ops or mobile games, especially while having a blockchain economy running on the other side.
Yeah, let's see. Biggest learning, I mean, it's a whole host. Yeah, I mean, I think for us, I think, with respect to, I think one thing I mentioned, stuff that's very, I'd say, experimental, like thinking, like once you put something in the game, it's hard to take it away. So definitely making sure whatever you put in the game is there to stay. So definitely, I think using live ops as a tool to kind of test whether it's a new event, tuning, whether it's a new mechanic. I think is super important. I mean, I think, you know, doing stuff in events, you know, that's temporary, allows you to kind of play around with kind of the makeup. But and two, I think is really just keeping, I mean, ultimately the economies are going to like live or die based on the supply and demand. So I'd say being very crystal clear, like one, making sure you have all your sources annotated, two, making sure you have all your syncs annotated, and keeping a really close eye on just the balance of kind of how much supply is out there and where's the demand coming from. It's going to be, I'd say, critical to making sure you have a long-term kind of player-to-player marketplace or market in general that you can monetize across time. I don't know, Trey might have some other tips.
Letting me rant. Live ops is your game. Live ops becomes the game. In fact, most of the games I've worked on the last 5 or 6 years started with like, well, what is the live ops? And then you kind of back into, well, what's the game that gets us to that live ops strategy? Probably the quick, since we only have a couple seconds, the quick takeaways: shorter events work better, like a 2-day event, 3-day event.
True.
Longer than 3-day event is too long, and a lot of places are kind of like, you know, it's a lot more, it's too much work, so we're gonna make this last for a week or 2 weeks or a month. That's not live ops. Live ops is you want to have a series of overlapping, very short events. So like you have a calendar, how many rows can you stack to the calendar, and how clear can you make the motivation for why players want to choose to participate in each of the rows, and having those rows cater to different personality types or different player types. Like there should be a type of live ops that's for your collectors, and a type of live ops that's for your progressors, and there's a type of live ops that's for your competitors, and each of those has like a 1 or a 2-day thing, and it's overlapped with each of the other rows has got a 1 or 2-day thing. So they are always there's always something to do as you're wrapping up this event. You've got this tension between like, do I spend my time in the collection event or do I spend my time in the progression event? And there's a lot of depth that comes to how you gear those systems together. I know you're not going to start that way, but thinking like what's the final way that this business will run as a live ops business, and then thinking backwards to like, well, what's the baby step one I can take towards that goal.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, just to note, just kind of which I've shown to be true. I'd say like for us as a game team, we focus a lot on player retention. In fact, I think that's almost the only KPI we really focused on across the summer. It's a lot easier to like monetize. I mean, there's so many like monetization techniques out there, whether it's, you know, battle pass or sales or offers or segmented offers or whatever else. I'd say monetization on games is a little bit easier than keeping the players in there for, you know, to retain, because that goes into the bigger, like to Troy's point, the motivation. Why am I in here today? Like, how am I in here today? That's helping me, you know, progress across the week, which is helping across this month. So I'd say from a KPI perspective, for us specifically, I mean, we kind of look at it all, but I'd say retention especially is one that we probably hold at the highest. You can always monetize them later, but, you know, I'd say retention's historically the one, especially in the current age of like TikTok and everything else going on in the world. Like capturing their attention for the long tail is hard. And I can tell you, like, a fraction of a percent on your day 30 is worth like 4x ARPDAU across the LTV of the user. So if there was one KPI, I'd start with retention and get that number as absolutely as high as possible. And even when you think it's as high, keep, you know, so it won't stay there forever, you know. So I'd say that's the KPI we really, I'd say, meticulously focused on across the balance of the year.
The primary thing that players are consuming in your game is novelty, and the primary way to drive novelty in your game is live operations.
Yeah.
Is there any resources on this maybe for like newer studios that want to start? Because this is something, like, to be honest, is something I feel like is the most challenging part, because complete new studio, never done live ops in the scale, would be very interesting to like how to learn it, like, internally. Not learn it, but like how to approach it internally.
For sure. I think the best resource for this is the Constructor of Fun, which is a podcast and a website and a Slack channel. So I'd start with the podcast and reading their teardowns, so that, like, go back into the back catalog and read all the teardowns of the top performing games. Like, read their teardown of Pokemon Go, read their teardown of Clash Royale, read their teardown of Raid Legends. and then listen to the podcast every week, because they're all PMs, all product managers, and they all think about a game design from a live operations perspective. And then they're a little gated in getting into the Slack community. But if you're watching the podcast and you're kind of you're conversant in that stuff, you can write a little letter, and it's a curated list of who's allowed in the Slack channel. But you can kind of game your way in if you show that you're watching, you're paying attention to what they're talking about in the podcast. They'll let you in.
Awesome. That's a great advice. Thank you.
Cool. Seems like it heated up towards the end, so I don't really want to call it, but I think we should call it.
Oh, I may even have to do another, if this is super useful, we can even do another talk.
Cool.
Yeah, a live ops talk would be amazing, just on site.
We'll take recommendations. We'll see what we can do. Perfect. Yeah, well, thanks so much to Nick and to Troy. We always love kind of chatting to you. And big thanks to all of you for making it so special and giving all the questions and firing it away. It's very much so me just being the maker of the marketplace, and Nick and Troy and the rest of you kind of interacting with each other in a player-to-player way. Sorry, that was a very bad pun at the end. So I think let's call it there. But I'll stay on the call for a little bit longer if there's any kind of general chat you need to ask me. Tomorrow morning, very early for some, apologies, but we do have the AMA on Twitter with Jay. So it's going to be really, really cool, and you'll be getting asked all the questions. So it's the other way around tomorrow morning. But yeah, thanks so much, Nick. Thanks so much, Troy.
Yeah, and if you guys have more questions, ask them in our Slack channel. We'll get you answers to them.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.